Hello, welcome to a quick walkthrough of your new student Chromebook devices. This is the teacher edition. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be walking through what the outside of our device looks like, as well as the touchscreen features on this device, and then finally different keys and shortcuts that are going to be of importance for your students. So it's important that you know of them as well. So let's get to it.
Now, the biggest benefit to this guy is the fact that these new Chromebooks are going to be touchscreen. But before we get into all of the great beneficial pieces of using a touchscreen Chromebook for students and all of the new engaging factors that go into that, before we get into that, let's talk about the outside of the Chromebook itself and kind of talk about some of the differences between our other one and the one that we have now. So I have my USB-C slot for charging, same as the tablet if you were a first grade teacher, or same thing as the other Chromebooks, except it requires a little bit more wattage, so students will get a different charger that will charge more efficiently for this Chromebook. There's the USB slot, same thing. Headphone jack over here, SD card reader, students will not need that for now. And then here's my power button on the side over here. Here's my charging light to let me know if it's charging or not. One other piece that is new with these is the fact that there's also another USB-C slot on the other side, meaning that I can charge my Chromebook on either side of the device, or I could have it charging and running something else in the other slot. USB slot again, so there's two USB slots. And then there is the volume up and down button, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Now, the inside of the device you're going to find is essentially the same exact thing. I have my keyboard, my trackpad, and my screen, which is now a touch screen. Sign-in process was exactly the same. I just signed in using my ID and my password. So now I'm in, and essentially the difference lies with the screen. So if I was to go into Google Chrome on my trackpad, for example, that's still exactly the same thing. I can still zoom in, for example, using my trackpad, using two fingers. But now what's nice is I have that same ability to use the screen and do every single thing that I could do before on my trackpad via the touch screen. So that includes minimizing the screen, for example, moving the screen over to use two screens. Oops, if I can get it to go. There we go. And I could have something else pulled up on my other side to where I have two different screens going. And I'll show you a couple of those shortcuts and those features in a little bit here. But just to give you an idea, everything that I could do using my trackpad, I can now do using my touchscreen. So I can scroll up and down, where I had to use two fingers before to do the same thing, left to right. One finger on the screen will do that same exact thing, whereas two fingers on the trackpad did it before. So students will be able to get used to using both of these features, but this will be especially useful with any type of draw feature, which I'd like to show you next, on how some of these features in different softwares that we use every day can be even more beneficial and impactful if we're using a touchscreen versus a non-touchscreen. So let's take a look at that. One of the first things that comes to mind this year with the pandemic is the fact that most of us have been utilizing Seesaw a ton with our class, and wouldn't it have been so nice if we would have been able to, instead of doing this where I'm clicking with one finger and trying to move with the other, wouldn't it have been nice if I would have just been able to draw right on the screen with my finger and create more beneficial pieces of work for my teacher. So now I'm able to do that. So if I'm going to undo this here, and I can also use the record feature and do both simultaneously. So if I was doing a math problem, for example, and I wanted to show my teacher, I could show them exactly what I'm doing and explain my work, for example. And then I could press my pause button here. I can press done, and then it will play it back for me, so that way I can see how my work went. So this is just one of the many different ways that you can utilize the touchscreen. Seesaw is just one. I'd like to show you a couple others that could be hugely beneficial for student engagement, participation, and making life a whole lot easier on your students when they're showing their work. Another area where this touchscreen could be greatly beneficial is using this for Great Minds for our math work. If you are giving them something where they have to draw directly on their screen, such as an assessment or a piece of work, for example, this one says draw a picture, rather than having to use the touchpad, they could simply use the touch screen to do all of those same exact features, or write their equation or whatever it is that they're doing. So this will make life a lot simpler for students. This would also be a great opportunity to use the full screen feature, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but that button's right here, to where students can see a lot more of the screen, and then they can scroll up and down. I'll have to use my move piece again. They can scroll up and down with a lot more ease in order to finish whatever the problem is that they're doing. Another area where this could be super beneficial is using a program like Pear Deck, which is district approved and everything is already paid for in our subscription. The big screen right now is my teacher screen. So when I move forward on my teacher screen, it changes on the student screen as well. But before, when I was trying to do draw slides like this, for example, it was a little bit more difficult to have students utilize this just like any other draw feature. But now with the touchscreen, I have the capability of using all these tools more efficiently to where I can be a lot more direct with what it is that I'm doing. And the teacher can see that firsthand as soon as those responses are given. So Pear Deck is another great opportunity for students to show what they know in new, unique ways, especially when utilizing this touchscreen to make things more beneficial and a little bit easier on students when they're showing their work. Now you may not think about Jamboard as another opportunity to use the draw feature or use the touchscreen, but it definitely is. If everybody knows that this can use sticky notes, for example, right? The Jamboard, and that's what it's most used for. But there's also a draw tool built within Jamboard. It's right at the top here. If I click there, I can also change the color. You can use a paintbrush, and I can write directly on my Jamboard. So this is another great way of having students show what they know in new, unique ways and make things smoother for them because now they have access to write directly on their screen rather than having to try to use the trackpad, which is a bit of a nightmare. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to show you everything in this top row right here because I'm sure your students may press something by accident or are looking for a certain feature with their Chromebook, and they're going to not want to know what it is, and you're also going to want to know so that way you can show them. But before I go any further, this Chromebook right now is kind of folded flat, similar to how a tablet would be. Just so that you're aware, this is the only difference between the Chromebook that I have and the student Chromebooks is that theirs will not be able to do this. So theirs will not be able to go into tablet form. That's the only difference between this model and the ones that your students will be getting. I'm only doing this to show you the screen as well as what's going on my top row here. So just so that you're aware. First one is the escape button. That's pretty standard. Students may not need to use that as often. The next one is the forward and backward arrow. That's what I call more left and right. The left is essentially you pressing the back arrow in your Google Chrome. So it's actually sending you back a page. And then same thing, the forward arrow would send you forward a page in whatever browser that you're in. The refresh button is going to refresh my page a little bit easier for students to find than finding it up at the top of their web browser, for example. I don't know if you noticed, but right now I'm actually in full screen to where you can't see the bar unless I move my cursor up or unless I bring my finger up and drag it down. If I'm using my touchscreen, I can press that full screen again and it will get rid of that. So it basically took away my bar on the bottom and the bar on the top to make the screen more full. This could be great if I'm using it to read something or if I'm in Seesaw and I'm doing an activity. That could be a great feature to have. Just make sure students know how to turn it off. The next one is the split screen button, is what I call it. I don't know exactly what it's called, but when you press it, it pulls up basically every window that is currently open in your tab, and you can swap back and forth between them very easily. Right now, this one's not maximized. Let me make that big. And at any given time, I can pull that back up and see all of the windows that I have opened. Also, right here, what I can do is I can press and hold or click and hold with my mouse. If I press and hold, I can move this to the left, which will immediately create a half screen piece, just like your Chromebooks did before. But if you're not familiar with this feature, when I let go here, it will put this screen to the one half, and then I will be able to do the same with the other half. There are a couple other ways of doing this. One that I really like is the fact that if I press Alt and my, I call them the bracket buttons, I'll be able to move that screen to whichever half that I want. So even if it is in full screen, for example, if I was right here and I pressed Alt and the bracket, it's going to immediately move that to the other screen. So this is actually quicker, I think, if you wanted to show your students the shortcut. Alt, and then whichever bracket, left bracket or right bracket that I want to put this in. And I can do the same thing with the other window. Whatever window I'm currently in is how that shortcut works. So just another great feature if you'd like to show your students.
Now your next step is going to be to share the student-friendly videos that I've created. There is a special one for the first graders currently going into second grade since they are not necessarily familiar with the keyboard. And there's another video for current second graders and up. So that way they get more familiarized with their new Chromebooks before they go about using them. So that way there's hopefully less room for error and they're more successful, more engaged, able to participate more with those devices. All the best.